Oh, yeah, we got to overturn.
You're listening to the E-Men, inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit.
Cops is filmed on location with the men and women of law enforcement. All suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
Ah, the memories.
That was cool. Well, back a lot of memories.
My goodness, yeah, that's a lot of memories with that one, of course. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Mike the New Haven podcast. This is episode 226. It's the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, and it is volume 25. We have hit the 25th volume of this miniseries that started last summer. And we're happy to, of course, have my next guest who I'll introduce momentarily. If you haven't checked out the previous show, that was another volume of the E-Men, of course. That was volume 24. That was this past Friday with Sergeant Ken Bone, who's a police officer and sergeant in ESU. Police officer in one truck and then sergeant in two truck. So we had the Manhattan Phil his entire career. My next guest had the Brooklyn Phil, who for exactly 20 years was firmly embedded in the inner workings of the world's largest and most recognizable police department, of course, in the NYPD. He joined the force in the spring of 1987 and began his career on the hardcore streets of Brooklyn. And they were certainly hardcore back then, and soon expanded into a career, of course, on the front lines with the intelligence division later, which we'll talk about a little bit tonight. Most notably, of course, the Emergency Service Unit, where for exactly a decade out of the 20 years he was on the NYPD, he was in ESU and responded to some very unique jobs. He was previously on the show for Tales from the Boom Room, involving, of course, the 1997 Brooklyn bomb plot. And that was a great show if you want to go back and watch it. But we're going to get the whole career from him tonight, not just that one incident. And that for this volume 25, the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, is retired NYPD Detective Dave Martinez. Dave, welcome. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Now, thanks for coming back on the show again. And for those of you that obviously have a question for Dave at some point, I'll make sure to get to it. And John Latanzio, he's here always. That he says hello. John, of course, good man out of Housing Rescue. And later on, 3-truck of emergency service. So good to see you, John. Hope all's well with you. So, and I remember reading this in 7 shots, which I should have had the book next to me, but that's a lapse on my part. It's a great book that kind of not only delved into that 97 incident, but also all the backgrounds the characters mentioned. It delved into your background. And it wasn't easy for you in the sense that, you and your mother were great. You guys were 2 peas in the pod. But it was rough with your father, which, I can certainly relate to on that front. So tell me about what helped you persevere despite the difficulties with him growing up in Brooklyn.
Just a strong family structure in a lot of ways. My dad was rough. He came here from Spain when he was 18 years old. So that whole mentality was very different from ours. Not even close. And my father was funny. We used to tease him, but he used to say, "I first in the family." And whatever he said had to go. Or you wound up with a boot in your behind, He's a tough guy, But there was a level of alcoholism with him too. That was the culture,
right?
At that time, he'd come home and he could drink a gallon of wine while he was eating supper. So it was difficult, But my mom was everything to us, I have a brother and I have 2 sisters, and everyone's very successful. My family structure, my family support group was great. And even to this day, my wife, my kids, I'm a very lucky man. I have an incredible support group. And I was always raised. My mom always told us that the world is not one square block where you live. You have to go out and explore and always treat people the way you want to be treated. And I think I did that my whole life. I treated everybody with respect, whether you were a perp, a nice guy, a victim. It didn't matter. I treated you the way I would want to be treated. And I made that a priority, and I guess it worked out okay.
I'll say, getting to that stage, I think you were the first in your family, talking about first in the family, to go on to the job. And, because of the things that were mentioned in Seven Shots, and I highly recommend for those of you that haven't read that book that you do read it, your mom wasn't initially fond of the idea of coming on to the police department. You're good. But, then again, you get the chance to kind of flip the script and flip the narrative. So was it that made you want to go into the job? What was it?
Oh, it was just being a kid. I loved cop shows. Adam 12. What else was there? Oh, man. Hill Street Blues. You name them, I watched them, And I just always had a passion for wanting to be a cop. I just thought it was a great way to change the world. And before that, before I became a cop, I was a teacher.
I didn't know that.
But I always had that desire. And I changed careers. Pardon me.
No, you're good. Dave Martinez is our guest tonight. This is volume 25 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. I mentioned John Latanzio. He's watching, of course. Thank you to Alicia B., Jay Driscoll, Joe Maliga, and Dawn Marie. Thank you guys for being here. Anybody else that will watch this live tonight or will watch the replay. So you came on, and it's interesting because right out of the academy, you go over to NSU 14, which I miss that structure in hearing the stories from you guys about the NSUs. I understand things have to evolve, but I wonder what it would be like if that NSU structure would return, because it gave you a chance to really go into the deep end of the pool, not without help, but you are obviously out there in these very, very, shall we say, unique areas. So tell me about NSU 14, what it covered, and what kind of work you guys were doing during that time frame.
It was the 7-9, the 8-1. But they bounced us everywhere. The 7-7. I worked all of the North precincts. They used to ship us out all the time. But I was very lucky. My lieutenant in NSU was Jimmy Dupree, and he was one of the best guys that I've ever known. Can you give me 1 second? I gotta drink something.
Is that kind of night? The weather's kind of messing with all of us, because I felt the same way earlier. Like I stepped out real quick and I'm like, why is it 66 degrees in October?
It's nuts. It's nuts. But I had Sergeant Colón and Jimmy Dupree. They were my bosses. And Jimmy Dupree was one of a kind. He was a patient guy. I'll tell you a story with him. Mm-hmm. I'm out on the street on a post, and I didn't realize it, but I was on the wrong frequency. So now he's looking for me for like 30 minutes. They can't find me. Finally, he pulls up. He finds me and goes, come here. And I said, yeah. He says, let me see your radio. He looks at my radio and goes, you're on the wrong frequency. I've been looking for you. And then he looks, and I got about 7 or 8 kids from the neighborhood that are with me, hanging out with me. He goes, what's that? I said, oh, Lou, it's called public relations. Now I'm in Brownsville. He's like, what? And he says to me, I said, yeah, I go in my pockets, and I got all kinds of candies and stuff for the kids. So I used to go out on patrol and talk to the kids and give them candy and try to show them I'm not the enemy. I'm not a bad guy. But he was like, you're the Pied Piper. He goes, I can't believe it. He goes, In my 20 years on the job, I've never seen nothing like this. And I just laughed about it, you know. But that was my introduction into the job. I loved it. I loved it.
Oh,
And, you know, say what you want. There were so many good people that live under not really acceptable conditions, because at that time, that was the height of the drug war.
right.
I mean, it was just, crack was whacking. It was insane. It was insane to see the stuff that went on, the shootings, the bodies. You know, it was sad. It was sad. And I felt like these kids, they needed something to look up to, somebody, something, you know, to get them out. And you know, I think the system failed all those kids. So I felt like I had an opportunity, because I was a teacher before that too. And I tried to use a little bit of both. But he called me like the Pied Piper every day. Those kids would wait for me, you know, and I come out. Didn't matter to me. They were just kids. They needed a break. Good kids, too.
Of course. And you know what? All these years later, even if they haven't had contact with you in a long time, they probably still remember you, because stuff like that, especially the good stuff, it stays with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like to believe that every arrest that I made, every rescue I made, I always treated people with dignity. That was the biggest thing. I wanted to treat people the way I would want to be treated, or their family, or my family. You know, go above looking at them as a criminal, because nobody starts off as a criminal.
Right.
There are things that happen in life that some have a great effect, and some have a terrible effect on them, terribly negative effect. You know, it's up to us to change it, to change people's opinions. And
Coming from a Spanish-speaking household, you know, there's a lot of Hispanics in that area as well. How do you feel being bilingual, or at least having an understanding of the language, helped you in your early years on patrol?
oh, that was my one up on everybody. Trust me, working there. Listen, I'd go into a bodega, and these guys would be running their mouth, talking all kinds of crap. Let's beat him up. Let's take his gun. You know. And then a couple times I just turned around and I start talking Spanish to them, and I tell them, I only look like a white guy. And I say, you got to learn how to read, brother. Martinez. Man, you got to see their faces. They would just. And after that, man, everybody in the neighborhood knew me. You know, I'd walk down the block. Hey, how you doing, officer? It was cool. It was cool. And then, you know, I was a runner. And one day we had a robbery. So I see the guy. Now I start chasing this kid. Chase them for probably either 3 or 4 blocks. I wind up catching him. First and only time I ever heard this. I had this African-American kid. I got him on the ground. I'm cuffing him. He looks at me. He goes, the fastest white cop I ever seen in my life. Laugh. I was laughing for the whole year with that one. I couldn't get over it. It was one of those, you're never going to forget that. To this day, you never forget that. And the look on his face, I wish I had a camera. That was definitely a Kodak moment.
For sure.
Definitely.
For sure. Absolutely. You don't forget one-liners like that. I mean, listen, humor in a situation like that goes a long way. Even if you're on the wrong end of the arrest, hey, listen, you might as well make light of it, right? And he did, to his credit.
It surprised you, huh?
Yeah, of course. I can't say I haven't thought the same thing. Not that I've ever ran. Of course, I've never been in that kind of interaction, but I can't say, you know, in just observing, I've ever not thought the same thing. So there you go. You buck the stereotype. But as you said, only looked like one. Weren't actually. Read the nameplate. Read the nameplate.
That's right. But you know, I ran in college. I ran in high school. I went to the nationals. I was okay. You know, I held my own.
There you go.
But it was pretty cool. Even the night that we did the the warrant on the bomb job, Joey turns around to the boss and he says, Dave's got to be the bunker guy. He goes, he's the fastest guy here. Ain't nobody faster than Dave. So he'll get in there.
Right.
And, it went a long way.
No, of course, as we'll get to later in the show. Like I said, volume 25 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. It is Dave Martinez, who's our guest tonight. Got a question in the chat from Joe Maliga, and it's a good one. He's like, on your teaching background, he says, one boss I had a teaching background, and as a result, expected more. Would you say expected more from those around you? You didn't have staff under you like a sergeant, but naturally working with these guys on patrol in an ESU, did you expect more? Do you think your teaching background made you that way or not?
Yes and no. There were guys that you could see had enormous talent, and you wanted them to reach the pinnacle of that talent. There were other guys, they're just there for the paycheck. So, is there anything wrong with that? No. Everybody has their own objective, But I struggled to do the best that I could, and I expected that of the people that I was with. You don't mesh with everybody. You don't like everybody. You don't like working with everybody sometimes. Everybody has their own style. So my thing was, I liked working with people that were like me in the sense that didn't want to run away from a job, didn't want to shit can a job. But, I want to go out there and earn my money. And you're given the ability every day to do something positive in the world, to change somebody's life, to save a life. Sometimes, also you might have to take a life too, but it's more positive than negative. Thank God. And I think you really have to utilize that, because the better you do, the more people would appreciate you, will appreciate what you do for them, and feel secure. And that's what you want. You want to walk down the block and say, oh man, I'm so glad that cop is here. Oh, it's Officer so-and-so. How you doing? Come on. And I had that in the 7-9. I had elderly people that would come out and they would offer me coffee in the morning. I'd sit on the stoop with them, lovely, lovely people. But you got to take the time to know the people. And that's critical of really good policing. Going around, not only introducing yourself, but being a positive human being, in a place where sometimes things are not so positive, and making them feel that they're safe, that they don't have to worry. So I expected that of the people I worked with.
That's only fair. And thanks, Joe, for submitting that question. It was a very good question. I'm glad I was able to highlight it. Billy Dempsey's watching. He says, hey, Dave, looking good. Hope all is well.
Hey, Billy.
Good to see you, Billy. Good
Another great guy.
And rocking the classic E-Man mustache there, as you can see.
Yeah.
Still.
We all had that at one time.
No, of course. And it's funny because when I interviewed Billy Kennedy, I didn't know he'd shaved it off. And I was like, I almost didn't recognize him without the mustache because it's like a signature, right? Yeah, I kidded Pete Collin about the same thing when I had him on. I'm like, same thing, great E-Man mustache. So you had some time in the 6-0. And again, all in Brooklyn was your career up until the intelligence division, which I'll get to obviously later. But working in the 6-0 during that time, more of the same, in terms of what you were seeing in NSU 14, or was there other stuff at play?
Different environment. The fact that it's Coney Island, the volume of people, transients from all over, more foreigners than anything else, because at that time, Coney Island, Brighton Beach, all that was just starting the beginning of the Russian influx. The Russians moving into that neighborhood. Well, we called it Little Odessa. and then you had a very, very big Latin community, whether they were Dominican, Mexican, Ecuadorian, Salvadorian, just a huge, huge difference, but I loved it there. I got there, and 2 weeks after I'm there, they put me in the summer detail, and I was pissed. I was like, what do you mean I'm going to the summer detail? But it turned out to be one of the best times I ever had in my life. It was a great, great time. I worked with some incredibly talented people. It's just good people all around, I loved it there. I had a big collar there. I worked with Billy Tobin, who we used to have Brighton Beach Avenue. And we're walking. I would pick up jobs all the time. If they were going to give it to a sector, man, I got the foot post. I'm a block away. I'll take it. Well, this happens one day, and I'm working with Billy Tobin, and it turns out that we go to the job, we climb up the stairs, and as I'm going upstairs, I see a hat on the landing, and then I see a pool of blood coming out from underneath the door. So, and I'm looking at it. I look up at the door, and there's a swastika drawn on the door. And the swastika was drawn in the guy's blood. And now the perp is inside, and he's screaming, I hate the Jews. I killed the Jew. I killed the Jew. So I wind up, I could see he was Spanish because he was doing it both in English and in Spanish, and his English was broken. So I start talking to him in Spanish. And after about 5 minutes, I start to get him to calm down a little. I said, listen, you got to open up the door for me. I got to get in there. He says, I killed that old Jew. I hated him, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, So finally, he comes to the door, and I tell Billy, who's with me, I said, Billy, if anything happens, you got to shoot him. You got to do whatever you got to do, So he opens up the door. He's naked and head to toe covered in blood. And here's the poor guy. It turns out that this man had survived Auschwitz. You could see the numbers tattooed on his arm. It was just terrible. So I went in the room. I wrestled with him. Wound up subduing him. And it was an unbelievable collar. It just was.
Yeah, man, he lives through Auschwitz just to die like that.
It happened 2 minutes ago to what I talk about,
Right.
And then they broke my shoes about it because the guy's name was Martinez. Turns out.
Oh, the killer. Great.
So you get back to the precinct. Hey, Primo, what are you doing? What's up, cuz? Nothing is sacred on the job.
No, as we know, and jokes like that. But you know what? You need. I'm not saying that you guys were making fun of the victim. Obviously, you weren't doing that. But you need jokes like that because that's heavy duty stuff. That's not right. And exactly. It's same thing in the fire department. If you don't make jokes like that, I say it all the time. If you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah, I remember. Somebody told me an old timer, and he says, Dave, if they don't break your shoes, they don't like you. That's how you know when you're accepted. When people come up to you and tease you and rag you and all that stuff, they don't bother you, you're doing something wrong. So I got my shoes broken quite frequently sometimes.
Nothing says I love you.
Yeah, I was working in 10 truck, and we get a jumper in Manhattan. So we go to Manhattan, go all the way up 28th floor. The jumper was on the 28th floor. They went up to the 29th, and we were on the 27th. So the plan was to draw them back to the door, make an entry, And as they made entry, throw the net, and we will grab the net and pull it in. So everything's going according to plan, except for the fact that he darted to the window. Now the net's coming down, and he starts to jump out the window. He hits the net. I jump on the window itself, hold on to the window, and I made the biggest mistake, and it almost cost me my life because I went up there without a Laracus. I didn't put any of my safety equipment on. Now I'm hanging, holding on to the window ledge, and now the kid bounces off the netting, and I grab him with one hand, and I pull him into me. Now it's about 90 some odd degrees that night, a hot, humid, nasty summer night. And this kid never said a word. He looks at me, punches him. He punches me in the face 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. And I'm holding on to him, and I'm screaming because now I'm starting out. I'm either going to go with him or he's just going to slide out. And I couldn't use my other arm because that's what's holding. Well, that's what I'm holding on to with, And I wind up losing this kid. He goes down 27 stories. Never said a word. But I'm telling you right now, as God is my witness, I can still see his eyes right now looking at me. It's so surreal that, and then afterwards I got a little chewed out by the lieutenant on the job, but he was very diplomatic about it. I knew I made a mistake. I should have put that Laracus on right away, and I didn't have it. By the grace of God, I didn't slip and die, because the other guys, by then, the guys came into the apartment and they grabbed me and pulled me back into the window. But I was hanging out 1 foot out and holding on, and this guy and getting a black eye from him punching me in the face. Yeah. I learned the lesson, man.
I'll say.
I learned the lesson, and I got to tell about it and live. Because you don't get that opportunity very often, but never forgot that again. Never.
No, of course. You know what? Then that's the thing. When you make a mistake, it's not in anything, and I'm learning this as I go into further and further into my adulthood. It's not that it has to define you. The only way it would define you is if you don't learn from it. And obviously, given the fact that, as we'll get to momentarily with you getting an ESU, you spent how many years in ESU? A decade. Obviously, you learned from it, and it helped you be a better E-man down the road. And before I continue speaking of Primos, here's Rick Martinez, my namesake, he says, continuing to make us proud. Hey, Rick, always a big supporter of this show. Rick's a good guy, very good guy. So good to see you, buddy. That being said, we get to 1991, and you're working in Coney Island. That's where Six Trucks area is, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. Six Truck is in that region. So what was it? Seeing them at work, seeing those guys around, it impressed you, or what was it?
Believe it or not, this all happened when I was in NSU 14, and we were covered in 9-0, an 8 truck. And Joe Laporte was an 8 truck. He was an old timer, one of the few guys at that time that had a detective shield. And I got a foot post there, so I start talking to him one day. And he was instrumental in me wanting to go to ESU. I was just a rookie. I didn't know anything, and he brought me into 8 truck, showed me all the equipment. At that time, they have the bomb bell and suits and the gun, everything. Took me through the whole truck, just me and him. And that impressed me so much. I said, if I go anywhere, this is the place I want to go. And I got really lucky. But he was the guy that was instrumental in my wanting to be an E-man.
And you get that opportunity, of course, getting through school at Floyd Bennett, and you come there in 1991. And what's unique, and before I continue to your point about the eyes, Eric Fries, who retired as first grade detective. And Eric, send me a timeline of your career, because I'd like to do something with you too, if you don't mind. He says, I remember the guys I shot. He looked like the guy's eyes, I shot, he says. He looked like the devil, no life in his eyes. I'm glad I killed him before he hurt another cop or citizen. So I feel for you, he adds. You'll unfortunately never forget those eyes. We're all haunted. And that's true. It's not an easy position to be in. I can't relate to it. So I sympathize with you and, of course, with you too, Detective Freeze.
That goes back to shooting Abu Mesa that night.
Yeah.
With a bomb job. What I saw in that guy's eyes, I will never, ever forget. I saw evil. If there is such a thing, I looked at the devil or whatever you want to call him. No emotion. It was nothing. And this guy would do anything to get his point. He would have killed anybody, anywhere, anytime. Didn't matter. This guy had nothing but evil. And I'd never seen that before in a human being's eyes. That scared the life out of me.
Imagine, as we'll talk about a little bit later as we go, we'll revisit that a little bit, of course, as we look further and further into your career, and particularly in the emergency service unit. And I was going to say, Brooklyn is so unique. And I remember talking about this with Bob Gallione from my FDNY miniseries, The Best of the Bravest, because you have Rescue 2 there. You also now, with the post-invention of the Special Operations Command of the FDNY, also have Squad 252 and Squad 1. On the NYPD side, you have obviously Truck 6, Truck 7, and Truck 8, because it's the largest borough. You have 3 trucks in one borough. And coming over to Verrazano on any given emergency could be Truck 5 or could be Rescue 5. So there's a lot of work to go around.
Usually both.
Exactly. And there's a lot of work to go around, and there's a lot of different companies with both departments that want to take that work. So being in 6, I mean, tell me, it's a wide area in Coney Island, but as for the reasons I just mentioned, it's a unique area. What was it like just trying to get to these jobs first before any of these other squads and companies I just mentioned?
Listen, as soon as the bell rang, it was pedal to the metal. You were going. That was the end of that. There's no way. We never wanted FD to beat us to a job, especially a pin job. Fires, that's their thing. It's not my thing, although I've been in a couple of fires and pulled out people, and I appreciate what those guys do because I ate smoke. We had a huge fire in Coney Island one time, and I was just a cop in the 6-0, and we get there, and the building's going up in flames, and the people are telling us there's 2 older Chinese women upstairs. So we go running up, me and my partner, we go up running, I don't know, 2 or 3 floors, and I'm looking for this lady, and it's starting to overwhelm me. They were in a closet. Both of these women must have weighed about 60 pounds. I open up the door, I grab them, and now I'm carrying them down the stairs, one in each arm, to get out, and the place is going up. And again, by the grace of God, man, I made it out of there. I don't know how I did it, but I got out. And another job that I couldn't get to was we had 3 kids die in a fire in Coney Island. Tried to get into the building, couldn't get in. And the horror of that whole thing wasn't only that the 3 children had passed, but that the next day, that morning, I had to go to the morgue to identify the bodies. And, oh, man, I'm telling you, there's stuff that's buried in my head that lives there rent-free, and I think it's true for every cop on the job. There are things that you will never, ever forget. You just don't. It's just what's going to trigger it today that you think about it.
Right. No, it's something that I remember Ronnie Griffith talking about with me, and also Glenn Klein. When they were on the show talking about that. It's like, I loved Glenn's analogy because he said it's like a sponge. When you squeeze the sponge, you're gonna get a lot of it out, but there's still some water in there.
There's always stuff there.
Exactly. There's always going to be stuff there. You never really squeeze it out. It's just a matter of finding healthy outlets to deal with it. And we'll talk about some of the outlets that you had. I mean, obviously,
I can't tell you how many times driving home after some of these jobs, I would start crying. I had nobody to talk to. I couldn't talk to my brother or my mom or my sisters about it. They wouldn't understand.
Right.
And then you have to put on. It's like this facade that you put up. You're a big tough guy. You can handle anything. But you know what, man? It takes such a toll on you down the road that you can't help but get emotional about it. You know, and I remember stopping my car and just sobbing for 5 or 10 minutes. And you got to just keep going. You bury it in the back of your head. You just do. And, tough thing. People don't understand that. People don't have any idea what the job is like or the tragedy that you see, and but it's there. And you know what, man? If I had my life to live over, I wouldn't change a thing. I love the job. I miss the job. I miss the people. I miss having that ability to help people every day. That was huge for me. That was huge. I'll tell you an experience I had. I had a foot post in Brighton Beach, and I see this kid climbing in through a first floor window. And I grab him and I yank him out. I had some choice words for him.
Allegedly.
Yes, I just had some choice words for him. And he was just a kid. He's just being stupid. And I threatened him within an inch of his life. And I said, if I ever catch you here again, that's it. You're going to jail. You're 14 years old. What the hell's the matter with you? Blah, blah, blah. And I break my foot.
Hold on, the phone. Got the phone there going off.
That's all. That's off. That's done.
There you go.
And I break my foot, and I'm at the surgeon's office. I walk in there, I sit down. In comes this young guy. He walks by me, looks at me, and then he goes to the back. And now he keeps looking at me. And I'm like, a little bit puzzled. I don't know him. I don't recognize him. If I do know him, I don't know him. But finally, he gets up and he says, "Are you Officer Martinez?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm sorry. I don't remember you. How do I know you?" He goes, "You remember that kid that you caught in the window that time in Brighton Beach?" And I looked at him. And I'm like, "How do you know about that?" He goes, "I'm that kid." He goes, "Because of you, I became a cop."
Wow. That's amazing. You made an impression on him. You turned his life around. It's amazing.
Anyway, well, that's pretty much what he said. "You changed my life."
Wow.
I was, even now, my hair is like standing up.
Mine too.
I couldn't believe it.
Man.
Couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that's
So,
I've always said this, and like I said, for those of you just tuning in, this is the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. It's Volume 25, featuring Dave Martinez, who did 10 of his 20 years in ESU. 8 million people in New York City, 8 million stories. Not all of them are bad. There's some ones that maybe start out not so good, but they end up really, really well.
yeah.
And there's some heartwarming stuff in there. In what N.J. Burke described in this show, longtime Channel 7 reporter, as a cultural mosaic. And there you go. There's a great example there of somebody going down the wrong course. He just needed that tough love. You gave it to him. Look where he ended up. He ended up quite well. And he got to thank you for it.
Never in my wildest dreams did I expect that. Never. It left. I think I was numb for like a week. I couldn't get over it.
But in all the best ways, right?
Oh, it validated what my mom raised us up that treat people the way you want to be treated. You'll change lives. You'll make a difference in somebody's life. And how many of us on the job have done something and changed people's lives, but we never know. I was fortunate that day, this kid came up to me. I would have, it just blew me away. I couldn't, I made a difference.
Yeah.
It really made a difference.
Yeah. It validates coming onto the job in the first place. And that's, I forget who said this. Might have been Joe Guerra, but it might have been somebody else, that with the ESU documentary that A&E did in 1999, and they shot between 1999 and 2000, I should say, that in emergency service particularly, you don't always have to lock someone up. You get to make that difference and see that difference play out immediately, because part of emergency service is getting the chance to save people.
Yeah.
And I imagine that applied to all the rescues that you were able to make across your 10 years in emergency. So tell me about some of the greatest rescues you can recall between 6 and 7 truck.
Probably the best rescue I had was a girl that was up in the projects, but this was in Queens. I think she was on the roof. I think the building was 28 stories, and she's over the fence. So I go up and I start talking to her, and I'm going to jump and stay away. So I start talking to her and telling her it's not that bad. There's always tomorrow. Come on, give me your hand. Come back. And this goes on. I'm talking to her for about a half hour, but I got good dialogue with her, And I said, "What happened? What got you to this point?" And it turns out her sister embezzled all of her money, left her broke. She was losing her apartment. She'd lost her job. So I just kept talking to her, and finally I saw a moment to grab her, and she let me. As I was talking to her, we're all hostage negotiators. We do all this stuff all the time, but I saw the opening to get closer to her, and I got closer and closer. And finally, I saw that I was losing her a little. I thought she was going to go. And she made her move, and I jumped over the fence, and I grabbed her and pulled her in. Everybody pulled me back in. And she was sobbing. I kept in contact with her for a couple of years just to see how she was doing. And she got her life back. And, one day she says, you saved my life. She goes, because I was going to go. I had nothing to live for. And I said, you got everything to live for. Nobody knows what's going to come tomorrow. Nobody. Excuse me.
No, it's all right. It's all right. It's, I said, what did you have, asthma?
Well, I got lung problems from
the trade center
in the whole year.
Yeah.
And every now and then it just acts up and
sprouts up. Yeah. No, I understand. You're good. Don't worry about it. I understand. And John Latanzio makes a good point. He's like, if you get them talking, a very high percentage of getting them back, he says, very few of them wind up actually going. That's true, John. And John would know. John would definitely know. Like I said, he was an E-man himself. And
when he was on the VZ.
Yeah, I forgot. I always forget because I'm like, you know what? I should have mentioned this earlier. John was in 5 truck too. I remember you telling me that on the show, John. My bad. 5 truck first and then 3 truck. Can't forget about our friends over in Staten Island. So, in working in 6, you mentioned some of the characters there earlier. But the beauty of ESU is the camaraderie is so strong because you get the chance to fly over to other trucks, right? So a guy in 10 truck, he's just as familiar with the guys in 2 truck, for example, as he is with the guys in his own truck because of the flying that goes around. Besides the obvious answers of 7 and 8, which are right there in your backyard, what other trucks and other boroughs did you most enjoy flying to?
Oh, I loved going to 2 truck. 2 truck was fun. 3 truck was fun. You know what it was? I really didn't have a truck that I liked one more than the other because on the midnights, we were like a family. all the midnight guys, it was awesome. Wherever you went, you know, you worked with great guys. I worked with Ray Ruiz. I worked with John Latanzio. Just a plethora of guys, and we all got along, and we were all there for each other. You know, just great group of guys. Just exceptional. You know, but that's the unit.
No, of course. And I have I have a few questions here. They're funny. Joe Maliga, whose question you saw there earlier, him and I have the running joke for those of you that are a little bit new to the show, where Joe always asks me this question. And the question is, did you deliver any babies?
No, believe it or not, I came close, but EMS got there and they took her away. So I never got that. That's the one thing I never got to do.
That would have been
Never
nice.
delivered a baby.
Yeah, so that's Joe and I's running joke. And this one comes from Mike Kane, who was on the show for the Best, the Bravest, retired FDNY fire marshal. He asked, did you ever get dipped in the lake at Camp Smith?
Everybody does.
Man. And there's two things to being an E-man, I feel, that kind of cements you as an E-man. You have to take that picture on the Brooklyn Bridge, or one of the bridges, Verrazano or George Washington. You have to have that picture up there with that view and the traffic below you, which is always a cool shot. And you have to go to Camp Smith. And you did both. There you go. So, hey, I will say, of course, the best times, as we've been talking about tonight, I will say, just as important in anything, but obviously a unit like this and the camaraderie and the function of it, as the police officers on the ground are the bosses. And you have those sergeants there, and there's been many great sergeants, a few of them who I've been able to profile in this miniseries. I mentioned Billy Kennedy, I mentioned Ken Bowen, John Lampkin's been on the show too, and it's always great. Al Baker, who was a sergeant and later lieutenant in the unit as well, same thing. Who were some of your favorite bosses, either in 6 and 7 or just across the citywide whenever you would fly, that you loved working for? You knew, man, this is going to be a good tour because this guy's in charge today.
John White, one of the best bosses I ever worked for. Mikey Mann, another one. Jack Cambria. Tommy Sullivan. And I knew Tommy from the 6-0. So, and then he came to ESU. Who else? Oh, John English, Joey Nicolo. You know, all guys, we were cops together, and we were, you know, then they became bosses. And the big Papa D, Sergeant Columbia. That's right. The Basher.
Yep.
How could I forget him? And God, I sound like a broken record, but you really don't realize how lucky you were to work for bosses like that, because you hear such horror stories about some bosses, but not in ESU. And they cared about you. You know, if you got reamed, if it was your time in the pickle barrel, yeah, right. You took it like a man, and that was it. It was done. You paid your penance. You know, the Basher got me one night. I got punished for 6 weeks. Took it on the chin. I earned it. Me and my partner, and, you know, never spoke about it. Nothing was ever said, but you were treated like a man. And I appreciated that. I truly appreciated the fact that they treated you like an adult. You know, and then you did the adult thing. You took your penance, and that was it. You know, I didn't complain. Nothing. You just took it. But some of the best bosses ever. Well, God forgive me for getting some names. Paulie, he was a pen truck. Oh, forgive
Hargrove?
me. Hargrove.
Yeah.
He was wonderful too, you know. Just a cop's cop.
Never I need to get Paul on the show.
What happened?
I need to get Paul on the show. I know he's been under the weather.
He's an amazing guy, man. Just amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Good guy out of 10 truck. Well, look who's here. He's going to be on the show this Friday. More on that later. Joe Dolan. I'm late as usual. What's up, Bubba?
What's up,
Hi, Joe.
Bubba?
Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you. And I look forward to profiling him this Friday, which I'll mention later on. Tales from the Boom Room, Volume 31 will feature Joe Dolan. So I will say, when the merge happened in '95, did Truck 6, I don't know if you were still in Truck 6 by this point, did 6 get any of the transit or housing guys?
They did, but I think I was in 7 truck when that happened, when the merger happened.
Well, 7 got John Bushing. John Bushing went to you guys, right?
John was a great guy. Yeah, we got him. We got Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
We had quite a few guys from transit. I never had a problem with them. I don't know what the issues were. There was none with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I never had an issue with them. Listen, they're E-men, they're cops. We work for the same system. What is there to be bitter about? If anybody should have been bitter, it should have been them, because they lost their federal overtime money.
That's right.
Lost benefits.
Yeah.
Those guys, they were raking it in. They were doing really well. So if anybody was supposed to be bitter, they should have been bitter. And the guys that I worked with, all gentlemen. Sergeant White came to 10 truck. We go on a job. We're there. I think I was like one of the senior guys that night. And he comes, I'm waiting for him to tell me what to do. He looks at me, he goes, Dave, go ahead. Do what you know how to do. He says, if this is what you think we should do. And how do you not respect the guy that does something like that instead of coming in like a bull in a china shop and ordering people around? You know?
That's true.
He watched how he worked, and he's still one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet. Just a wonderful guy.
I think what helped too is that with housing and transit, because as you said, they were federally accredited departments, whereas the NYPD still to this day, which is weird, they're not. I don't know. That's a different story for a different day. But they had so much time, and this is what Joe Guerra mentioned to me on the show when he was on, so much time to train, to where when it came time for the merge in their respective STSs with you guys, there really wasn't much to train them on and get them up to speed on because they were already up to speed on it.
Yeah, I mean, the transit guys were the best guys to do train jobs.
Oh, of course.
That was their niche, Everybody came with a specialty in their talent. Mm-hmm. And we all learned from each other. Oh, do it this way. I never thought about that. They opened your eyes to just more improvisation. Being in ESU, the first thing you're taught all through STS is improvise. There's nothing you can't do. Improvise. You will find a way to do it. And they opened our eyes to opened up my eyes anyway, to a lot of different ways to handle a job. And they were a tight group of guys, man. They were tight. So, but now with the merge, I don't know. Maybe there was people that begrudged. I didn't begrudge anybody. I didn't care. We all there to do the same job. So, like I said, I think if anybody lost out, they lost out as far as financially and with the federal part of it. So, but I didn't have any problems with them at all.
I laugh because Transit Rescue was around for a long time. They were around for almost 20 years because they started in the late 70s, 1977, 78. So they got a good almost 2-decade run out of their rescue unit. But housing was very, very new, and their rescue unit wasn't around very long. And I'm thinking about their truck, and I love their truck. I love the design of it. But every time I see it now, I think of the Billy Kennedy line when he's on the show. He's like, the good humor truck, because it looks like a nice I'm like, Billy, why'd you have to say that? Because every single time I see that truck, see a picture of it, the first thing is the ice cream jingle. Going up to it instead of asking this for some tools. I'm going to ask for a vanilla snow cone. Oh man, this is volume 25 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, and Dave Martinez is our guest for it. Certainly happy to have Dave aboard. So of course, post-merge, you get all these guys in there, and it's a great time of course, for ESU, because like you said, you get all that expertise. Working in 7, I wanted to ask you about these guys. And I've heard a lot about one of them, but him, this next one I'm about to mention, I haven't talked about him much, but I should, and I will now. Ronnie Kloepfer got to ESU a few years before you did. I think 87, 88 is when Ronnie got in. And then, of course, Santos Valentin joined him a lot later.
Yeah.
And Ronnie seemed like a renaissance man. I'll get to Santos in a second. But Ronnie, he ran the lacrosse league, I think, the lacrosse team for the NYPD.
Yes.
Obviously, was a father, had a lot of duties on that end at home, and seemed to be I was a sniper with ESU. In addition to that, think about everything else that he knew in terms of emergency. Talk about a real E-man. He seemed like a really, really good E-man, and I'm sure he was. Working with Ronnie, what are some of your best memories of getting the chance to break bread with him?
You never had to worry about anything. Ronnie was always cool, collected, had his act together. And you looked to him for guidance in a lot of ways, because he was just that kind of guy. He would have made an incredible boss. He was the kind of guy that should have been a boss later on in his career, and he would have been a damn good one. Just a talented guy. Just a very, very talented guy. Wonderful. We lost some great people that day too. But.
No. And he was one of them, sadly. And the thing about it is, with Ronnie, and there's a picture of him. I wish I could show it. It's in my REMA calendar in September, and I think it must have been a few years into his tenure in ESU. I can't tell which bridge he's on, but this is before selfie sticks were a thing. They take a picture up there. Yeah. He must have been the one holding the camera, with whatever tool he had, because you see him there with a bunch of guys behind him, and he's happy as can be. And there's the kind of guy that, Billy Dempsey sums it up best, top shelf. There's the kind of guy that not only would have been a great boss, but, and I say this in the nicest way possible, because one could say the same thing about Mark DeMarco, for example. They don't want to be bosses. They just want to stay right where they are. They're so content with where they are. And how could you not be? I mean, listen, it's great work.
Yeah. No, but he was a natural. He was a natural to be a leader, just a born leader for guys. And his whole demeanor, his attitude, perfectionist, just, always training, always doing stuff. Just one of those guys that it was an honor to work with him. He was just that kind of guy.
Oh, for sure. And it's funny because one of the guys that was teammates with him, I should say, I was a detective on the lacrosse team. It took 3 guys to run it after he died. And he was joking in the New York Times. He's like, we don't know how he did this by himself for all these years. And to your point about leadership, he ran that whole team by itself. And it took 3 guys post him passing away for them to keep that team going. And look who's here, Ray Ruiz. He says, hey, Mike and Dave, Papi Chulo, you look great. Miss you, brother. Good to see you, Ray. Good man, Ray, of course. Had him on the show recently, a couple of weeks ago, for an excellent volume 22. And Santos Valentin, you talk about polar opposites, right? Opposites attract, because you have Ronnie, who is like this squared away, perfectionist type guy, really fit into physical fitness and all this different stuff. And Santos could not care less about any of that stuff. Happy, just
I can't even tell you half of the stuff he used to say when I allowed. But trust me, that whenever Santos was around, he had everybody in tears.
One of the funniest stories I heard about him was that he loved his dog. And I love dogs too, now that I have my fur nephew in my life. And he loved his dog so much that when he would leave to go work his tour, he'd leave the Animal Planet channel on for him, and he'd watch it all day until Santos got back home.
That's funny. I never heard that. That's funny.
I read that about him, that he would just leave the Animal Planet channel on. He'd go leave his tour. He'd say goodbye to the dog, go do his tour, and just there the dog would be when he came back home. He was sitting there watching it like it was the greatest.
Wow.
Thing. Just another great. He was a sniper too, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they both were. I mean, listen, like I said, polar opposites, right? But both great E-men. And that's just it. You're working with so many great guys across the trucks over the years, and camaraderie is key. And that camaraderie came into effect on that job in 97. Now, for those of you that would like to go back and hear about that job in full, go to the Tales from the Boom Room playlist, and you can hear about that job for the show that I did with Dave, his partner Joe, who'll be on the show this Friday, Paul Yerkou, Rich Teamsma, and Sergeant Freddie Manzanillo. But just to give the brief synopsis on it, July 31st, 1997, you get the call. You and Joe were flying out the 10 truck that night. You had a grenade job with Kevin Barry and Jeff.
That was our first job that night.
Yeah. And then after that, they get the call. I think it was in the 8-8 precinct to meet up there, go out to that apartment where these two Hamas guys were going to blow up the Atlantic Avenue subway. They had the bombs there. They reached both of them reached for the bombs, and Joe and yourself shot them both. They survived. They were critically injured, but they survived. And one got acquitted of significant charges. He got hung on lesser charges, which was, I think, lying about his visa and got deported. The other one got life. But tell me, here's a job where you said you stared evil in the face, and that's true. But you also came very, very close to death. Think about it. If they would have had a few more seconds to activate those toggle switches, everybody in that room would have been killed. So after a job like that, how do you think that job changed your perspective, not only on your career, but just life in general?
Well, it's going to sound crazy, but I never really let it change my life to that point. I did what I had to do. And by the grace of God, we came out okay. Now, I don't know if you know the whole story about that, but before this job, 2 days before, I had gone home and I had a dream about shooting two guys. And I never, ever dream about work. I know nothing. But in the dream, I wind up shooting two guys. And I was telling this to Joey when I went into work. And Joey says, "What do they look like?" I says, "I don't know. They, dark skin, maybe Arab, Spanish. I don't know." I said, "But we went into this room. They got up. They attacked us, and we wound up shooting them." He says, and Joey says, "Well, what happened?" I says, "I don't know. I woke up." Now, this was 2 days before the job, or 1 day before the job. And now, that night, never thinking about that, but when that job happened, it happened July 31st. And I was born on July 31st, at the exact moment that we had that job. Yes.
Talk about full circle.
Oh, reborn. I was reborn. That's the only way I can look at it. I went to Cardinal O'Connor. We were at St. Pat's, and I told him the story. And I said, "What do you think?" And he looked at me and goes, "I really don't know what to say other than God has had a purpose for you." And it all goes back, because when I was born with a tumor on the side of my head, and they had to operate and remove it. I don't know how many surgeries, but I was told, "You were here for a reason." Maybe that was the reason. I don't know. But the running joke between Joey and I was, "Dave, if you have a dream, call me. I'm not coming to work."
That sounds like Joe.
Yeah, no, that's Joey. But I've had some really bizarre things happen in my life. That to me wasn't on time, Baba. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Thank God.
Carl DeWenzel's here. Says, "What's up, fellas? Good to see you, Carl." Another former alumni of this show. Good man,
Yeah.
Carl DeWenzel.
Great guy.
Tactical medic. He is one of two tactical medics I've had on for the E-Man miniseries, which was obviously him, and of course, who I mentioned earlier, John Bushing. Two great guys. So,
ever do Mark Teitler?
No, I would like to, though. If you have his number, give him. If you talk to him, give him my number. I'd be happy to.
Okay.
That'd be a good show. So we get to, I guess, 2000. You get past the Y2K thing. It's the last full year in ESU. And before I get to the 11th, just in general, a lot of guys want the detective shield in ESU. I mean, I know now they kind of get it with more frequency than they did in the past, but still, it was tough back then to get that detective specialist nod. So guys would go to Truck 11, of course, as Joe did, went to the bomb squad. Other guys would go into OCCB or narcotics, kind of like Pete Conlon did, right? But your case was interesting. You went into Intel. So tell me, when did you start thinking about leaving ESU, and how did Intel come up? Because I'm sorry, because I do Tales from the Boom Room. I'm so used to guys going from ESU to the bomb squad. I'm kind of always shocked when they don't, you know?
Well, most of the guys either went to the bomb squad or what was the other unit? Man, my brain is fried. But I because of the terrorist job, because of shooting them, I felt I could do more if I went to Intel. And I always liked the investigative part of the job too. And I got lucky. I got in. And the guy that really got me in, and I started working for Carl, my sergeant in the ESU. And then he took me into the liaison unit, which was kind of funny because I had Steve Hines and him. We had a meeting one day. And they go, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You have the highest phone bill in the entire department."
You're a popular guy.
Oh, kid. I said, "You told me to liaise, so that's what I did." And I had contacts in Austria, Germany, France, Spain. I had a guy with the Caballero, Otto.
Mm-hmm.
I used to call him, and he says, "How many kids you got?" I said, "I got 4." He goes, "What happened? No TV in America?" So, you know, we're all characters. It doesn't matter where you're from.
Right.
But I thought I could do. I thought I could do more good and rediscover the job, the other facets of the job that I never really had the opportunity to explore and learn.
Right.
And I loved it. You know, and then I was put in as the liaison to SOD with Chief Camadana. And I knew the chief from the bomb job. He was the duty chief that night. And you know, he treated me like I was his son. He was great to me. And he was a great guy to work for.
Trying to get him on the show. Come on the show, Chief.
He was a great guy. Still is a great guy.
Housing guy too, right?
Yeah, another housing guy.
Yeah, another housing guy. But you know, Carl Smith. I'm going to get to another comment in a second. He says Carl Smith says served with Dave in ESU and Intel, a great guy. And before I get to Carl Duenzel's comment, which I know I'm probably going to get a laugh out of real quick because he was on the show and he's a great guy. And I know he had Intel for a while. Well, did you have any dealings with John Cutter?
Of course.
Great guy. Great boss, I imagine.
Awesome guy.
Another housing guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love John Cutter.
Those housing guys were good dudes, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah. No, he was a real deal.
Working for Chief Cutter was a privilege. He was a hell of a guy to work for, man. Hell of a guy. Always had your back, too.
That makes sense. Sounds like.
And I used to run into him all the time on the midnights when he would be the duty boss. You know, he'd be the duty boss and he'd show up on a job. Okay, guys, do your thing. You know, just a great guy, but even better to work for. One of those guys you just never forget.
No, of course. Sorry, I cut you off there. Me too. Patty Pogan here, who is the record holder for the longest episode in this podcast's history. And congratulations to him on that at 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 1 second. He says, "Good evening, everyone. Good to see you, Patty." Yes, that was a show. He broke down Sadawi's record, of course, when previously held the record at 3 hours, 11 minutes, and 21 seconds. You know, natural storytelling.
Wow.
Wow, indeed.
Wow.
Carl Duenzel says, "Tell him about the shitboardings, Dave."
Oh my God. Yeah, me and Kevin Gallagher, we were from Intel, and we were picked to go on the Queen Mary with the ESU guys. That was always a trip. So we'd go down to Staten Island. They would take us out to the docking boat, and then in the middle of the night, here comes this ship out of the darkness of the ocean, and we board it, climbing on it, on the Zodiacs. That was a trip. That was a trip. That was a good time too. Good eating.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Patty says, I got 3 more hours. I'm sure you do. But that was a great show. And hey, look who's here, my man, Joe Guerra. Jose Guerra says, hey, Dave, looking great.
Joe.
Hey, Joe, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in tonight, my man.
Another great guy.
Great guy. And when he was on the show, and that was a fun conversation with him. And Joe, can you stop making fun of the Yankees, man? I'm in enough pain as it is. I don't got to open up Facebook and see you, rubbing it in. I didn't mock the Mets when they lost. I wanted the Mets to win. Why are you doing this to me, Joe? I thought you liked me anyway. That's besides the point. My feelings are hurt, Joe, but I'll get over it. So last question before I get to that day. What and don't get into the classified stuff of it, obviously. May to August 2001. I mean, I'm not saying that Intel wasn't looking at terrorism. Obviously, I'm sure they were. But was it the main thing you guys were looking at pre that day, or were there other stuff you guys were looking at? And obviously, like I said, don't give the specifics.
No, it wasn't just that. There was a whole load of stuff, all domestic stuff. And everybody had a task to do, but 9/11 changed the world, changed life in this country. It opened up our eyes that
I'll say
we were untouchable, and we got touched. It's just Intel at that time too. Before that, I think a lot of it was mostly executive protection. Diplomats coming in, foreign affairs that we worked with the State Department, protecting people. So that changed Intel too, because I remember when I got to Intel, the Intel guys were like, "Oh, who's this hot shot?" And I used to hear the grumblings, and I just laughed. I didn't give a hard.
Thank you for catching yourself. I was like, please no. I don't want to have to edit anything.
Oh my God, it's so hard.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate the effort. You can let it all out once the show's over.
I came from a place where everybody had an ego, but we all cared about each other, and the ego was the secondary thing. Being an ESU. Every guy that comes on like now and says hello and all that, I have nothing but fond memories of working with these guys. We all love each other. We were all there for each other. The worst thing you could do if you were a perp was mess with one of us, because if you messed with one of us, you messed with all of us.
Exactly. And I think in a unit like that, you kind of need that ego, not to the point where it becomes unhealthy and you think you're better than anybody. I'm not talking about that part of it, obviously. But I think you kind of need that self-confidence, because imagine if, like, to your point, right, you're trying to go over and handle a jumper job and the guy next to you is not confident he's doing a good job strapping you in. I don't want to work with that guy. So that kind of helps to have that ego to that extent in a unit like that. Because without it, buddy, you got to go.
The one thing you learned is that we were not all good at the same thing. Everybody brought in their specialty. So if you weren't comfortable doing the scuba diving, there was 20 other guys that were ready to run in. If you didn't like doing the bridge climbs or going for jumpers, trust me, there was plenty of guys that had the Loracus on and were jumping out of the car before we even got there. So everybody, it was just everybody knew their zone. Everybody knew their strengths. And you knew that if you had a guy that was good, a good talker, a good negotiator, that's who went to the front. Not somebody that was going to, I don't know. You don't really want to kill yourself now, do you? You got a guy that was instrumental and could make an impact on somebody that was that desperate. And that was the beauty of this. There were no weaknesses. Everybody had a strength. And we used that to our advantage. Always used it to our advantage.
I got to tell you a Jack Cambry story now that you bring that up. And Jack, of course, Gentleman Jack, who not only was a great E-man, but really became the master in hostage negotiation and ran that unit for many years. And there's another unit that has a heavy ESU imprint on it, obviously, with Hugh McGowan having served as a commanding officer. Yeah. Frank Bowles originally as well, former E-man in his own right. And Jack was talking to a guy one day, and he told the story, and I was laughing. Every time I tell the story, I laugh. And the guy's getting ready to jump. I think it was a George Washington. And he was saying, to the would-be jumper, and eventually, long story short, they did get the guy down, and it's good. He didn't kill himself, but he was like, "I know exactly how you feel." And the guy turned to him and said, "No, you don't. If you know exactly how I feel, you'd be right here getting ready to jump with me." So, to your point, sometimes you have those guys that know how to talk, and Jack certainly does. Sometimes there's guys that are better. What's the old saying in Spanish? Calladito te parece más bonito.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But now I'll tell you a story along that line.
Go ahead.
We had a jumper in 6 truck one night. I think it was 6 truck. Anyway, the kid's on the roof. He's on the ledge, sitting on the ledge. I wind up talking to the guy. I climb up on the ledge. I'm sitting there talking to him. And at that time, I was going through a pretty bad divorce. And this kid caught his girlfriend in bed with somebody else. So he's telling me this, and again, I go, I know how you feel. Because I've been through I'm still going through it, I'm getting a divorce, this and that. And the funniest thing was the guys that were there in the truck were like, who's going first? Dave or the guy who's going to jump first? And the candy was like laughing. They were like, "Oh my God, this can't be happening." But I wound up getting the kid off the ledge. I felt bad for him, but it was the funniest thing to be going through a divorce, similar to this kid, and everybody's making jokes out of it. You gotta have thick skin. You gotta have a sense of humor.
Absolutely.
When I lost the jumper in Manhattan, I go back to 10 truck quarters that night. As soon as I walk in the door, there's Ronnie Harris. Who else? Jesus. Billy. Man, just the names.
I'm sorry. John Latanzi was like, but at least we had you tied in.
That's right. They thought it was like, which one's going first? And, oh my God. I think Dave's going to go. I wouldn't doubt if they were taking bets. Put money on it. But I lost the jumper that time with the net. And I go back to quarters. And there was stuffed animals on one of the guys' lockers. And there was a big monkey on there. So as I walked through the door, Ronnie Harris takes the monkey, and I didn't see it in his hands, throws it at me, hits me in the chest, falls on the floor. He turns to the other guys in court. He goes, "Shit, he still can't hold on to nothing." I get to the back to my locker. They went out and bought a box of Butterfingers and took it to my locker. So I see that. I come out and I'm just hysterical laughing, and I got Butterfingers for all that. Here, guys, it's on me. Holy cow. I'm telling you, man, there's some good times. Funny. No matter how bad things were, man, you were able to laugh.
And that's good. You need place. Anytime, anywhere mentions a story, I think it was Vinny Martinez that had this job, although it might have been John Politoski, and it was a jumper. And unfortunately, the woman, some of them have already made that decision. They're going to go, and I don't think whoever had the job, they didn't even have time to say hello. And that woman just went as soon as they opened the door. And
when they're determined to go, they don't sit up there and give you the chance to talk. They just go. That's their intention. They made up their mind.
Yeah, and that was her case, sadly. And she was a beautiful woman, and whatever her problems were, unfortunately, she chose that way to solve them, which is not the way to do it, obviously. But that's not funny. But when they got to the quarters, this part's funny. Like you've seen jumpers down in your life. I don't have to describe to the audience, most of you who were former E-men in your own right, how the jumper looks. I think you have an idea. And they had pizza, like pepperoni pizza, waiting for, I think, either Vinny or John at food truck after the job, and they're just eating it in the, it's got the slices, the cheese and the grease falling off of it, and they're chewing in front of this guy, trying to see if he's gonna hurl, but
Yeah.
he held his own. He held his own. You guys in ESU are a trip, and here's Carl. He's like, always a fun time climbing up the side of the QM2 during a snowstorm. Pilots wearing Dockers and loafers, and we were full kids out.
Yeah, no light air, man.
No
light air, but good times, right, Carl?
No, absolutely.
Good times. We had a lot of fun.
I'll say.
The opportunity of a lifetime. Who can say that they had the opportunity to do that?
No,
some of the things
many.
that we've done, people live their whole life. They can't. They don't do 1/10 of what we do.
And if people heard it, they wouldn't believe it. Honestly, like sometimes I hear.
Well, that's why I never talk about it. Nobody believed this stuff.
And it's amazing because I believe it, but even then, like once I'm done editing the show, when everything ends, and I lay my head on the pillow at night before I shut my eyes to go to sleep, and I'm literally looking like this. I'm like, I can't. They actually did that, and like, yeah, they did. And nowhere else will you read about that kind of stuff. I mean, listen, it's a great. I think it might have been Tony Lisi that said this to me, and I think it's so true. Tony Lisi, who worked with Carl and you guys over in Six Truck and later went out to 5. It's like, the NYPD is the greatest show on earth, but we got the backstage pass. And those were his words, and it's so true. It's definitely true.
Very relevant. Yeah.
No, and it was relevant then, still relevant now. Just to touch on that day briefly. I know, Joe, when where you were when that happened in the chat, and you'll tell me about it on Friday. But when did you get down there that day to the Trade Center? Was it before the towers came down, or was it after?
After.
Okay. So
I started that day. My mom had sold her house, so she had a closing, and I had to go with her to the closing because normally I would have been with Joey and Sergeant Rosado. We were part of the counseling group for guys that had been in shootings. And that was the day we were supposed. Joey would have picked me up normally on that day, and we would have drove in together. But I told him I would meet him later on because I had to be at the closing, and then I wound up going there after the fact.
So getting down there, and this is the interesting part about emergency. So many guys who had left went back in to help out. Pete came, Colón, who mentioned it on this show, he came back. You came back. Jack Cambria came back. I think Patty McGee, he had retired the week before, right? Do you have that correct?
I don't remember. I don't know. But maybe he did. I don't know.
I think he did, and he came right back, if I'm not mistaken. If I had that mistaken, somebody in the chat, please correct me, because I don't want to get that wrong, obviously. But all these guys that had left ESU and had moved on, I'm not going to say to greener pastures, but had moved on to other endeavors, come back, and there you were. And obviously, knowing Rodney. You were very close with Rodney. Rodney was a cop, was a sergeant. You named one of your sons.
Rodney was in the STS class.
So
he's one of my best friends there. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I named my son after him.
His middle name, right? I think is Gillis.
Matthew Francis Gillis Martinez.
Yeah. So here's a situation where, you're looking for 14 guys, and from the newest man, which was Brian McDonald, who got to ESU right after you had left, came out of the STS, I think that July, to the senior guys who had been like Ronnie, like Santos, Rodney, John DeLera, guys that had a lot of time in that unit, Mike Curtin, looking for them, finding them. It was a rough time to work that pile because it's not just them, it's the civilians that are missing in there, the Port Authority cops, the firemen too, who suffered the most losses that day. What kept you going, man?
My love for these people. They were my brothers. I think we all wanted to find some sort of remnants of them there. And we went through our periods of depression. And to me, the most interesting thing was watching the dogs, the service dogs, the rescue dogs, because I used to talk to the handlers every now and then, and they would ask us to bury ourselves in some debris so that the dog will get a positive hit and find somebody, because the dogs would go through depression, and that would bring them back, that would motivate them to continue. And believe it or not, I think we were the same. We needed something we had to do something positive, to find something positive, to feel like we accomplished something, that we were able to bring closure. And that was a big thing. It was a really big thing. And unfortunately, we really never found many of our own, But that's, I remember when it happened, and I went to Chief Harnett, who was the chief of Intel.
Eddie, love that guy.
Yeah, Eddie. Did you ever interview him?
I did. Yeah, great guy.
Oh man, awesome boss. And I asked him. I said, if he would let me go back to ESU. I says, I gotta go. I gotta find my friends. And he says, absolutely. He says, but there was a stipulation with it, and the stipulation was that when it was all done and said, that I would come back to Intel. And I said, yeah, okay, and he let me go. And he was such a gentleman that he actually promoted me to detective while I was back in the hole, back in ESU, which was, I didn't expect to get promoted, on time, but he promoted me. And, but I had to go back. Those were my brothers. Those were my best friends, Those were guys that I'd seen the best and the worst with. And they were my heroes. Because I guarantee you not one of them, like anybody in this unit, would have thought about their lives when they went into that building.
Yeah.
All they thought about was the mission and the job, to get people out, to save people.
I think there's something that Kenny Winkler said, and it's true. It wasn't with me. It was an interview that he did with 511 Tactical, which was great. And he said, I think and he got emotional as he was saying this, it's like if you would have told those guys, all 14 of them, that, this was going to happen, these buildings were going to come down, as they were in there working to get these people out, and they saved many people. He says, I think they would have just kept working. I think they would have worked faster, but kept doing what they were doing. But they would have worked faster, is what he said. And I think that's so true, because there was something Mike Curtin said. And I remember, again, not to me, but Mark DeMarco saying this in the Rescue Cops documentary that I think the History Channel did, where Mike Curtin could have easily just taken the guys and said, listen, we already know the other one's going to come down. This other one already did come down. Let's just get out of here. He's like, no. Building 6. Let's go search Building 6, because now in a situation like that, when there's debris around you, you have a skyscraper that just came crashing down. You have another one that's burning and has debris coming off of it, and it's in danger of collapsing. What is the average person thinking? I'm getting out of Dodge.
Running.
Exactly. Yeah. But here he is in the middle of the situation. I thought that was a testament to ESU and obviously him, saying, no, let's check this building, make sure nobody else is in there. It cost him his life. But then again, if I could talk to Mike Curtin right now, and if he were here, and I would be able to ask him, as well as any other guys, knowing what would happen, would you still go in there? Probably say yeah. No. Check that. Probably not. Probably, definitely would say yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's the character of the men in the unit that is above and beyond anything that anybody will ever see. True heroes. Till the last second on the earth, they are true heroes, and they're heroes for all time. And that's what made being a part of that unit and working in that unit made it so special. Just an incredible group of men.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a little bit more about Intel in a second, then we'll get to the concluding segment, which is a rapid fire. But I have to tell this Mike Curtin story. As you know, Mike was a Marine, sergeant in the Marine, he was gunny sergeant. And somebody commented this about him when I was doing my research on him a while ago. And that they would make him, he would make them laugh because he would jump over fences head over heels as opposed to like going legs first. He'd do the Marine thing, and I'm picturing it and I laugh. just right over the fence and just do the tuck roll, which sounds like him. So that was a funny little story about Mike, who was a sergeant in Queens out for a while and then came back to Two Truck in the late summer of 1998. Good man, Mike, and very, very. There's again, I say this, and I know I sound like a broken record, but between the guys from the fire department, the guys from ESU, I think to myself, man, I would have loved to have had a Mike Curtin on the show and have a conversation like this one. Or Ronnie Kloepfer, or Santos, Valentin. The interviews that I could have done with those gentlemen, it's.
Well, if you had Santos, you'd wet your seat.
I imagine. So I'm told. I would have had a lot of fun with him. No doubt about that. That would have been a heck of a show.
No doubt at all.
So I guess the one question I can ask about Intel is that with that afterwards, was there a sense of feeling reinvigorated because you felt, okay, this happened to us, like you said earlier, we were touched. Now we got to make sure we really tighten down the hatches to make sure this doesn't happen again. I imagine, camaraderie and Intel must have been good enough as it is, but
John Cutter played a key role.
Yeah,
and motivating Intel and getting the job done. John was just an incredible leader, an incredible person. I shouldn't say still is. And he was one of the best bosses I ever worked for. There wasn't anything I don't think anybody wouldn't do for John to get the mission accomplished. He was a cop's cop. He just was.
I spoke to him for an hour and a half. I wanted to run to a pick roll for him, man. I hear you. What a guy. What a guy. Real quick before you continue, look who's here. Philly Grimaldi, mutual friend.
Hey, Philly.
It's like, hey, Mike, hey, Dave. Good man, last stop veteran and true E-Man hero, of course. Phil's co-host with Bill Cannon on Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. A 2-time guest of the show, Philly. It's very good to see you. I haven't talked to you in a while, Phil. I hope you're well, man. Hope you're doing well.
He's great, man.
Yeah, he's great. Straight out of Brooklyn, Philly Grimaldi. Love that guy.
Sure is.
And John Latanzio brings up a good point. It's like to what I was saying earlier about the guys that are not here. He's like, that's why you have us to tell their stories. And that's true. That's a good point, John. That is very much true. And I love that. So you get to 2007 and you retire in that spring of 2007. When did you know it was time to go?
I got to the point where I said, how many times can I get lucky? And my family was at the point, I had the black cloud that wherever I would go, something would happen. Whether I'm with my wife and I watch a guy assault his girlfriend or wife in his car, he's beating the crap out of her. I pull him over, I get him out, I make a collar. I'm going to the dentist with my wife and my kids. We're driving down the block. I see a robbery go down. I bail out of the car and I'm telling my wife, just follow me. Slow down, slow down, slow down. They do the robbery. I chase the kid 3 blocks up 3rd Avenue. And in between this, my kids are little. So she's passing me with the van. And I'm chasing this kid. My kids are hanging out the window yelling, "Get him, Dad, get him." And I'm running and I'm looking and I'm like, this is like the OJ commercial that they used to have years ago when he's going through the airport. And my kids go, "Get him, Dad, get him." I wind up tackling the kid in front of a bank and I lock him up. Who would believe this stuff? I always ran into stuff. Always. I wound up giving the collar to the 6'8", and it turns out that night I'm home, the phone rings. It's about 10 o'clock at night. And it's the chief of Brooklyn South. Jesus Christ, I'm really getting old. But he calls.
Look it up for you.
He was, Jesus, what's his name? He calls my house. Oh, he was out of the 6-8.
Brooklyn South, he said. NYPD
Yeah.
Chief 6-8 precinct. Let me see here. Let me see what pops up. You go to the Google. Of course, Google's giving me a bunch of results I don't want.
He went to transit. He became the chief of transit too.
Joe Fox?
Joe Fox.
Yeah, there you go.
Joe Fox. Joe
I've had
Fox
him on the show. Great man.
Yeah. Joe Fox calls my house at 10 o'clock. And my wife's having this conversation. She's laughing. I just look over at her and I said, "Who is it?" She goes, "Oh, it's Chief Fox." Come on. She goes, "Yeah." Turns out he called me to let me know that they closed out 18 open 61s on these 3 clowns. And that a half hour before, they mugged an 89-year-old woman, beat her up, threw her down on the street. And like grabbing this kid, they closed out all of those old burglaries, robberies in the 6-8, which was shocking to me. Now, I knew Joe Fox, nicest guy in the world.
Yeah.
But to get a call at 10 o'clock at night, I couldn't believe that either, So another one of those black cloud moments.
And after that, where are you going next? What detail do you want? I'm
going
going
that was it,
section. That's where I'm going, buddy, to the pension section. Man.
But I still regret leaving. I still do.
It was a great run.
I loved it. But my mom, my brother and sisters, how long are you going to get away with this? Sooner or later. So I left.
But here's what I say to you and to all the FD guys that gave me the same answer. I wish I would have stayed longer. And I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's true. Think about how many guys and gals did not get the chance to go down to the pension section and never got the chance to fill out that paperwork because they died in the line of duty on both departments. So the fact that you got to go down there with some bumps and bruises along the way, I'm sure, but you got to go down there, buddy, and you got to put in that paperwork. So many others never did.
And there is life after the job. No matter how much you love the job, there is life after it. It's not the same, but made me appreciate more what I did and how I did it, and all the people that I connected with on this job. The friends that I've made forever till I take my last breath. All these people will be my brothers. They'll be my friends. How many people can say that?
Half of them are in the chat tonight.
I got a lot of friends.
I can see that.
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate. Very fortunate.
On that note, we can go into the rapid fire, and that is the 5-pin run questions from me, 5-pin run answers from you. You could say pass if you want, of course. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right, here we go. First, if not for the police department, you can't say the police department, what other career could you have seen yourself pursuing and enjoying?
Teaching.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, you were a teacher. I forgot you were a teacher. Yeah. We've had so many such a great conversation tonight. I forgot that you were a teacher. You mentioned that. Yeah, there's a good little snippet there. And there's a lot that you can do with that, of course. In general, we need our teachers. Second, either an ESU or Intel, doesn't matter. Favorite squad room snack?
Oh.
You can't say Butterfingers.
Almond Joys for me.
Oh, there you go. All right. And you talked about this to an extent with some of the other jobs. But if there's another job that sticks out and if it can't be said on the air, then fine. But funniest call, either on patrol or an emergency service that you ever responded to?
Oh, my God. Funniest call I ever had was in an SU. When we get a call, it's cries for help. Woman screaming. So me and this girl go up 2 stories.
I think I know where this is going.
Oh, you know where it's going. Well, my man came out. He knocked on the door. My man came to the door. He was butt naked. So my partner was a female. As soon as he opened the door, she goes, "Oh my God." I said, "Is everything all right?" And I'm trying not to just fall on the floor laughing. And he says, "Is everything all right?" And we heard a woman screaming. He goes, "Oh man, I told my girlfriend to stop yelling like that." I said, "Is she all right?" He goes,
Oh, she's fine.
we were doing the thing. I said, "I'm sure you were." I said, "Where is she? I just want to make sure she's okay." Sure enough, he brings us in the apartment, go in the back. She's got the blanket over her. And she goes, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell like that." You had to be there just to see the face. Oh my God.
Man,
Oh, you just made me relive one of the funniest things in my
my ribs hurt.
She was in shock.
I am picturing that.
The guy says to me, he goes, "Oh, I think I was just laying the pipe a little hard." Holy moly. That's got to be one of the funniest jobs I've ever had.
God, that might take the cake. Out of all the questions I've asked in the rapid fire on the fourth one, you get a lot of different stories for that one. That might be the one that takes the cake in terms, or third question, I should say, in terms of funniest call. My goodness. Fourth, and on that note, let's talk about food. Favorite bar or restaurant in New York City?
Oh man, it was always Bay Ridge, pizza joints. I would go to Spumoni Gardens. That was the best pizza in Brooklyn, in my opinion.
Philly Grimaldi knows a lot about Spumoni Gardens.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. And he wants to know, did your partner go back after her tour and knock on that guy's door?
I don't know. We never talked about it again. I wouldn't doubt it, though. That thing scared me, man.
Oh, baby.
I needed the noose to control that.
And fifth and final.
Made me feel very small.
This is a family-friendly show.
Yeah,
show.
No,
I kid. Oh boy. Yeah, this is the Mike the New Haven podcast, ladies and gentlemen. It is. You never know what you're gonna get in a live show. Believe you me. Fifth and finally, what advice? Talking about which is a question that Joe Malika submitted earlier. I'm going to flip the question a little bit because it's a good one. I always say, what advice would you give to somebody coming out on the job? Now, you talk about life after the job. It's difficult for some guys and gals to make that transition. So in terms of somebody that just put in for their papers at the pension section, you've been retired a while now, 15 years, what advice would you give them on how to navigate retirement?
I think you really got to come on the job with a plan about what you're going to do when you retire, when you leave the job, because most of us retire when we really don't put enough thought into it. So you have to prepare whether you want to teach, you want to be a laborer, a carpenter, a cement guy, whatever you want to do. But you really got to give it some thought if you want to start your own business, because you leave here with not only the connections, but the knowledge to do so many things. And, I never really put any thought into what I was going to do. And if I had to do it again, I definitely would have prepared more. And I think in a lot of ways, I would have wanted to become a boss. But going to ESU, the last thing you wanted to do was be a boss. You had front row tickets to the greatest show on earth. And being part of it was an awesome experience. Just no words can describe it. No words can describe it.
I'll say. And we got quite the look into that tonight. And it's a career to be proud of, from women screaming to terrorist jobs to collars off duty, that's a 20-year odyssey, my friend, that very few people can say they've had. So before I say goodbye to the audience, the lovely audience, of course, always so great to me, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Is there any shout outs you want to give to anyone or anything?
Just to all the guys, they know who they are. They had a great impact on my life, and they'll always have an impact on my life. Papi chulos.
Yeah, thanks to all of them as well. Great guys, each and every one of them. And I'll go in order here. Joe Maliga, retired correctional officer. Philly Grimaldi, Patty Pogan, John Latanzio, Joe Guerra, Ray Ruiz is here. Make sure I don't miss anybody else. And if I read your name twice, well, then oh well. More love to you. Carl Smith, Eric Fries, Billy Dempsey, Jay Driscoll, and Joe Dolan, of course. Alicia B as well, and Dawn Marie. Thanks to all of you for being here. I truly appreciate it. So coming up next on the Mike New Haven podcast, he's in the chat, and he'll be on for Tales from the Boom Room, Volume 31. That's your partner, of course, Joe Dolan, who spent many years himself in the emergency service unit. Then he went to Truck 11, as we'll joke about on Friday, with a June 2001 transfer over to the bomb squad. Was a bomb tech down in North Carolina, too, Wilmington.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to chat with him about that stuff. Volume 31, like I said, of Tales from the Boom Room. In the meantime, on behalf of Dave Martinez, I am Mike Colón. This has been volume 25 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit, and we will see you next time. And as the E-Men like to say, anytime, baby. Good night. Take care.
That's right. Good night, guys.